r/Nosleep. Posted by u/Go Navy 27. My city has been cut off from the world and overrun with monsters. I have a set of rules to stay alive. Rule number 4 saves me from being an unwilling organ donor. Part 4. Hi there, friends. It's me, your friendly neighborhood monster fighter. I've been working on a lot of the things suggested to me. Y'all are brilliant, really. I wish you were here with me. I'd probably be killing a lot more monsters. Never mind, scratch that. I wouldn't wish this on anybody. Anyway, I've found a handheld voice recorder. I couldn't find any at the Walmart I visited last, although that store's a mess, so who knows if I just missed them in the rubble. That meant my next best option was a store geared towards technology. There's only one Best Buy in the area, and I climbed in through an already broken window to check it out. Unfortunately, I guess it got hit pretty hard in the initial monster attacks or shortly thereafter, because most of the equipment was ruined. TV screens were smashed, laptops were obliterated, odds and ends from various technology were everywhere. And the bodies were worse. Trust me, it was rough. I counted at least 10 bodies, and they were hardly even recognizable as humans anymore. Some seemed to be Kayla victims. A few were the distinctive empty sacks of skin that Ashleys leave behind. 2 were the remains of a brand attack. They'd been there a while, I think, based on the horrific smell. Imagine school lunch that's been left out in the sun for a month. I almost puked about 6 times, but it still had me on edge, because any of those monsters could have hung around. Luckily, Mr. Bailey kept watch as I scrounged through shards of broken glass. I was beginning to think there was nothing intact in that goddamn murder store, but finally, after cutting my fingers way more than I enjoyed, I found it, a single voice recorder. One of those portable ones that looks like the love child of a remote and an MP3 player. Victory. So I did pull another all-nighter after that, because I sat there and pressed down the button and recorded myself saying blueberry for 18 hours. Don't recommend it, I did not have a fun time. Yes, I generally need only about 12 hours, but it's getting darker earlier now. Winter will be darker for longer, and it's better to be safe than sorry. Half-assing my recordings and suddenly having it cut off before dawn would result in a poor, unsuspecting me immediately getting acidified. I don't know about you, but I'm not on board with that. I've updated rule number 9, accordingly, by the way. Rule number 9, if you see a figure made of shadow or if it gets dark unnaturally fast, start saying blueberry and don't stop saying it. Alternatively, if you have a recording of blueberry, play that. Seriously, you can't use the word blueberry too much. Next up will be a hardware store, as long as I can find one that's not overrun. Here's the thing, I know a hardware store would be super helpful. All of you only reinforce that. But it's kind of a problem, because all the stores nearby are popular monster hangouts. I don't know if it's because they're smart enough to know that any surviving humans could really use a lot of the stuff stocked there, or if they just like the high ceilings and wide spaces of the warehouse-like stores. It wouldn't surprise me if they're doing this on purpose to make our lives harder and prevent poor saps like me from getting my hands on those supplies. They seem pretty smart, or at least many of them do. Which is unfortunate for me. All this to say that I haven't been to a hardware store in months, even though I know it could help with a bunch of things. Because I'm scared, and because it seems like a surefire way to get myself killed, and because I generally get myself stuck in stupid situations enough already without purposefully walking into the disaster waiting to happen. But your suggestions have made me think that maybe it's time to come up with a plan and figure out a way to sneak in. Either that, or keep venturing further and further from my usual zones of the city until I find a hardware store that isn't quite so infested. I've been thinking about it. Promise. Once I decide on a plan and successfully, I hope, broken into one of those stores, you'll be the first to know. Assuming I don't die before that. In the meantime, I was going to tell you about rule number 4 today. First, though, it occurred to me while writing this intro that I never really told you much about me. I have no idea what any of you imagine when you picture me. You know more about Mr. Bailey and even the fucking Calebs than you do about me. I liked that at first, but as I interact with you, even if it's via the shittiest internet in the world rather than face to face, I feel like it'd be nice if someone out there knew who I was and could call me by my name. Maybe it'll make me feel less lonely. A guy can hope. So here it is, or at least the basics. We're not to a personal, touchy-feely level yet. I'm not discussing rule number 1 or my family, for example, don't even try. But I'm ready to share some general, first encounter level stuff. My name is Eli. I graduated high school in 2019 and then took a gap year. I was supposed to start college this fall. But due to the clusterfuck that is my life and, well, 2020 as a whole it seems, I obviously did not do that. Instead I'm here, in the city I fully intended to get away from, and I may well be here for the rest of my life. Fantastic. My family was great. I'll leave it at that for now. Just know that they didn't deserve to die like they did and that I really miss them. I don't really know what else to tell you. My birthday was recently. I turned 20, and it was a super exciting party. By that I mean I sat at home, thawed a frozen pie I'd found at a supermarket and ate half of it, and watched a movie with Mr. B in my lap. The Princess Bride, if you were wondering. Inconceivable. Ha, fucking great. Then I spent the next few hours in the bathroom, periodically throwing up, because even though a frozen pie supposedly has a shelf life of 6 to 8 months, this one apparently did not. I mean, it's been 9 months, but I figured it was close enough that I'd still be safe to eat it. I, apparently, was wrong, and boy, did I pay the price. But I guess that was a pretty fitting way to kick off my 20s, all things considered. Well, that was fun. Enough about me. Let's move on, shall we? Now calling to the mic, rule number 4. Rule number 4, don't attract attention. No loud noises or flashy lights unless unavoidable. But in case you do attract attention, have explosives on hand. See, this is good general rule, because attracting attention from any monster is dangerous. Obviously. However, a lot of them aren't actually drawn to you by noises or lights or anything. Caleb's, I think, hunt by smell, Ashley's hang around places you'd find food and try to trick you that way. I'm pretty sure Dylan's mostly wander around after dark in the hopes of crossing paths with some unlucky soul. And sure, if you're near one and make yourself easy to find, they'll target you more easily. But that's not the same as a monster that actively hunts based on sound and sight. If you guessed where I'm going with this, congratulations. A head bump from Mr. Bailey to you. That's right, the monster that does hunt like that exists, and it's called a Brent. Well, by me, anyway. Your official source of monster names. I've mentioned them before. They kind of resemble big, ugly werewolves. By that I mean they're tall, covered in dark hair, fur, and have ears and pointy snouts like a wolf. But they're not quite the same, because they also have claws that are about 10 inches long. They're basically knives, and have the tail of a scorpion, which, yes, another good guess, the tail's sting is venomous. In short, ugly motherfuckers. I know I describe all the monsters that way, but I mean it when it comes to Brents. Luckily, they're also towards the dumber end of the spectrum. They'll flock toward loud noises, and no, I don't mean something like talking normally or watching TV. This isn't a quiet place. I mean like, driving a truck into the dome or destroying half a store while you fight a Caleb. Both of which I have done, so I speak from experience. They'll flock towards lots of light, too, like moths, neon signs turning on, maybe car headlights, stuff of that variety. Again, not normal shit like small lights in houses or laser pointers, thank God. It's really only the big stuff that attracts their attention. I don't think they're very detail-oriented. A teacher wrote that on an assignment about me once, you know. Caleb and I were forced to do a world history report and presentation together. He got an A, but I got a B because my contributions weren't detail-oriented enough. Is it my fault that I didn't care about what the Janissaries got up to? Spoiler alert, they pretty much all got killed anyway. Man, fuck Caleb. He didn't deserve that A. Fuck that teacher, too. Ah well, they're both dead now. I won't say that's karma, but... Anyway. Some good news about Brents is that they're less dangerous now than they were when this all started. That's because there's fewer people fighting monsters and trying to survive, so there's less noise and less electricity usage. In general, if I live my life normally, I don't run into Brents too much. That is, assuming I book it out of an area after I kill a screaming Caleb or break a bunch of stuff in a store. Which I always do. Well, usually. You may remember me saying that my light show had a beautiful effect on Caleb but attracted a pack of Brents. That is, unfortunately, true. But more good news about Brents is that they're also not the hardest monster to kill. They can get blown up or burnt to a crisp just like I could. So set them on fire or make some Molotov cocktails, and you're good to go. That is, if you see them coming. They're fast and strong, and if they sting you with that damn tail, it'll paralyze you. And then you get the delightful treat of laying there and watching, unable to move, while it tears out your organs and eats them. Brents like hearts and livers the most. At the beginning of all this, I saw a lot of people get torn apart by Brents. I've almost died by them a few times, mostly before I realized it was the sounds of fighting and murder that drew them. Back then, I wouldn't rush to leave after, say, killing a Caleb, and Brents would arrive shortly after. It took me longer than it should have to get it through my thick skull why they always seemed to show up after minutes worth of horrific screeching. Thankfully, I caught on quicker about how to kill them. I first realized it when I met a group of people a few weeks after the city fell apart when the monsters arrived. You know, every time I say something like that, all I can think of is, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Ha! If only my life was that good a story. It was a group of 30 or so people who had made their home in a library. A nice one, with 2 floors, large arched windows, and the most books I've ever seen in my life. I ran across one of them while raiding a grocery store, and she took me back to meet the rest. I had a really pleasant night at first, actually. They were friendly. Most didn't know each other and had lost their families or friends immediately, like I had. It was comforting to talk to people who'd gone through basically the same thing, even if they were all drinking pretty heavily and getting more and more wasted. I would have loved a drink, trust me, but I haven't survived this long by letting my guard down. Even then, getting drunk in a world where I was surrounded by deadly monsters just waiting for a slip-up seemed like a stupid idea. After a few hours, they started getting up and retrieving books from the shelves, throwing them to the center of the floor in a large pile, a few of them drunkenly singing sea shanties as they did. I looked to the girl next to me in confusion. What the hell are they doing? We're having a party tonight, she said excitedly. Everyone's invited. What do you mean, everyone? I said cautiously, unease growing. Something about her eyes and the way she'd said that had me very concerned. Mr. Bailey, who had been curled up unbothered on my lap earlier, was wide awake now, his claws were pricking into my leg, and he was growling softly as he watched the book mound grow taller. She threw her hands up in the air, laughing. I mean, everyone. The humans, the monsters, all of them. She grabbed my arm and pulled me in close. Her eyes were bright, too bright. Sickeningly so. You don't really want to live like this and eventually die a terrible death when you least expect it. Wouldn't you rather choose your time to die with friends by your side? Wouldn't you rather leave this hell now and ascend with us? Her voice was fast but filled with wonder, and I realized with horror that she truly believed what she was saying. I also realized what I'd been brought back to. This was a fucking suicide party. They'd been drinking for their last night, and they were about to intentionally get themselves killed. I jerked my arm away and stood up, my blood cold. No offense, but you're insane, I said. All of you are insane. You can give up if you want, but I'm sure as hell not dying tonight. She smiled at me. Too late, she said, and before I could do anything else, fire exploded beside me. I jumped to the side as flames licked closer and shielded my eyes from the shower of sparks. Looking over, I saw that the large book pile had been set aflame, and a massive bonfire of sorts now stretched up to the ceiling. It was enormous, and it was clearly visible through the windows. As if that wasn't enough, they all started to join hands, and the song changed from sea shanties to a unified, deeply chilling rendition of Hallelujah. The girl reached for my hand but simply shrugged when I recoiled, completing the circle without me. This was easily the most terrifying thing I'd encountered since what happened to my family, and that was saying something. Stop. Stop. You're crazy. I insisted. They ignored me. Mr. Bailey chirped anxiously, and I realized he was right. They were a lost cause. If I didn't leave now, I'd be Brent food just like them. So I ran for the door, but it was already too late. Brents are fast, after all. The large windows exploded as 4 Brents burst through them. I ducked behind a column to stay out of sight, and within seconds was witnessing a massacre. Blood sprayed, squelching interrupted the song as organs were ripped out. Bodies slumped to the floor as they were paralyzed or disemboweled. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. And I'm glad I didn't, because then I saw something that saved my life. One of the Brents, apparently the stupidest one, tried to leap over the bonfire to attack another person, but it didn't jump high enough. It passed right through the flames and began to howl in pain as they burned it. I stared in fascination as it landed on the other side, fire engulfing its body, and struggled until it fell to the ground, a burnt, ashen husk. That's the first time I had seen a Brent die, and now I knew what they were vulnerable to. The exit was blocked anyway, I couldn't leave. Which meant my best option was to use the fire against them. So that's what I did. I took off my jacket, wrapped my hand in it, and then sprinted for the fire. Miraculously, I made it there, and I wasted no time grabbing flaming books and launching them like missiles at the closest Brents. Not to brag, but I'm not a bad shot. I made contact with the 2 near me pretty quick, and I guess their fur is flammable, because the fire spread easily. Thank God, because otherwise they would have come after me sooner. As it was, I had time to keep moving, dancing around the edge of the fire and continuing to pelt them with burning books. It took a few for each of them to truly go up in flames, but eventually they too became a lovely column of fire, howling as they cooked. Yes, it did smell kind of like barbecue, but in a gross way, like if the meat was spoiled. That left one Brent, who unfortunately had just finished his meal of human intestines and was looking my direction. My hand was burning even through my jacket, and I wasn't sure how many more books I could grab before I seriously injured myself. But the Brent had stood up and was heading this way, growling, its eyes fixed on me. Before I could touch another book, the fire exploded outward. I guess maybe they'd poured gasoline on a few of the books. I don't know. I went flying and landed on more books and broken glass near the window. My cheeks and hands landed heavily on glass shards, and I could feel the blood dripping immediately. But overall, I was okay. The Brent had been closer to the side of the bonfire that had erupted. I'd avoided most of the impact. As I sat up, my body sore from the landing, I knew I'd be aching for days. I was praying that the explosion had killed it. Even from my spot on the floor, I could tell it had. In addition to the human remains spread everywhere, there were pieces of what can only be described as hairy meat near where the Brent had been. A disembodied scorpion tail lay not far away. I breathed a sigh of relief and staggered out of there. For a moment I didn't see Mr. Bailey and panicked, thinking he might have killed, but I'd taken no more than a few steps before he trotted up, twined around my ankles, and purred, happily following me over the wet, bloody floor and out into the night. I taught myself how to make Molotov cocktails after that, so that I have an easy way to attack from a distance if I accidentally attract Brents. I had a bunch of explosions rigged when I tried that light show, because I knew it would probably draw a crowd. And it did, and rule number 4 saved me from a deadly encounter with the Brents. That experience in the library still haunts me, if you were wondering. Their horrible group suicide and their determination to take me with them. Rule number 4 protects against Brents, and my rules as a whole help me survive monsters. But what do you do when the humans are the danger? When humans might be the death of you, even in a world where there are literal monsters? There's no rules that can prepare for that, and maybe that's the most terrifying part of all?